the truth is the biggest leap, it's going from bad to good, good to better, better to great. The hardest leap is from nothing to something. Like that's the hardest thing to do. You know, it's funny because you say, well, how do you get started? And this is like, it seems like just cheesy, but you get started. Like you start where you're at. You just start. There are so many things that you can do to not start. And that's why I said I like visuals. Like I just start, mind mapping and all those different softwares that I use, and I have to catch myself sometimes because I make these diagrams and I start spending so much time making these diagrams because after they're done, to me they're like beautiful.
Hey everybody, I'm Lianne Shinton from Pet Biz Experts and rebranded as Automation Dogs. I run a software and CRM for dog trainers. And Jeris Pugh is visiting us again from the Martial Arts. And I'm so excited to have you here today because last time we talked about like business stuff for dog trainers, and you're just so incredible because of the book, the podcast. So maybe we can focus this time on what you've created, your amazing business and how unique it is. Bobby Lyons recommended I talk to you originally because of the uniqueness and how you brought like fitness together with obedience. And yeah, I'm so excited to learn all about it. So welcome, Jeris.
Welcome, or thank you for having me again. Uh, Hopefully I didn't talk too much the last time that we were doing this, but I'm glad you had me back.
Well, you got a lot of good info.
Thank you for that. But yeah, Bobby Lyons also, she's been great. I've known her a long time, and I do appreciate her setting us up, to be able to do this.
I saw she's going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina, which isn't too far from you. I think in July she's doing something over there.
Yeah, it's about maybe 8 hours by car. I've been down there. I have a friend I went to high school with, actually. He went down to NC State, never came back. So it's a beautiful area down there. So that's cool.
Yeah. It looks like a neat seminar, fitness related seminar. I just saw it on Facebook today. So that looks pretty awesome. So Jeris, before we start on the martial arts, I had a question about your book. Like, how did you write your book? How did you get it published? Like, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's super cool.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of ways now. It's easy to kind of get a book. It's like self-publishing and stuff. There's a lot of services out there. I use BookBaby to kind of go through the process and editing and all that kind of stuff. They I want to say they make it easy. I should say it like this: they make it possible. It's not easy, but they do make it possible in order to do these things. The hardest part obviously is writing it, is getting it done. And you can't do that if you don't start, kind of thing. So if there's things like that, whether it's dog training or whatever experiences, business or whatever, you just got to sit down and do it. Like that's always a thing, and it's really hard because so many things, just whether it's your business or not, right? So the book falls in line with everything else. Like you just have to kind of get that mindset of I'm going to do this thing, and it's not I kind of, I'm a grinder. You don't have to grind. It's not how you have to do it. Whether you set aside a little bit of time every day or a little bit of time every month, depending upon, it's just creating the habit of doing it and going through and going through. And it is a challenge. And I think some of the bigger challenges is making yourself vulnerable to people and what they think about what you're doing, what you're trying to do, or how you present it. And so in that regard, when they have these services and just the being able to make it possible, you can do it without much input from others. That's because it's safer to do it because you don't have to expose yourself. Whereas, let's say if you're going through a publisher, they're going to read it and they're going to just rip you apart and tell you to go home. But you still have to kind of go through that process because it makes it better. Like, people are going to say, I hate this, and people are going to say, I love this. And, you can always say people really, they don't necessarily know exactly where you're coming from in the sense of how they're judging it. And it's easy to judge and it's easy to criticize. But as much as it may hurt or as much as you might not find it valid, if you really just accept it and take it in, there's going to be pieces in there that are going to help you, whether it's things that you might change or whether it fortifies your belief or opinion. Like you have to put it up against people for them to kind of come at you, for you to really know how strong you or what your conviction is. And so I would say that's a big part of it. And so it took, I mean, it took, you know, like maybe 18 months. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's a kind of from like start to finish, sitting down and just, I'm a very visual person. So I do a lot of mapping, mind maps and diagrams and things like that. I know you were showing me some of yours for your services and stuff.
Yeah.
And that really resonates with me. And so I'll kind of go through that process where I'll diagram things out and kind of connect the dots. But the other thing that I think in terms of this process is always being open to what I said as best you can to what other people say, but it changing along the way. And I would say, I don't know, maybe uh, halfway through the process, it could have been that I really started. This is going to sound crazy, but I really started to discover what the book was about and what I was trying to say. Because you'll go into it and you say, I'm going to
Wow.
write a book about the business of dog training, and you start doing it, and then you're not just writing a book, just because you want to. It's not like a journal, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like it's not a journal. Like I'm trying to present this information to people in a way in which they can use it in a way in which is empowering to them, and they can you know it'll help. And so you have this idea about your experience and what you've been through, and you start writing, and you're like, okay, that's what I did, but again, I'm giving this to somebody else. Like, what is my main points here? What are my main goals? Like, what is this really about for me to share with whoever might be reading it? And that's to me always the fun part of doing stuff like that is the discovery. And I think it's important again because people they get on track and they're writing or whatever it is you're creating your dog training business, and you feel like it's just got to be on this linear kind of path, and it doesn't have to be. Like you whether it's going through the editing process of the book or whether it's just discovering who your clients are. So when we open and we're talking about fitness and stuff, and part of the idea was fitness, sure, but then we start to discover our clients aren't, let's say, dogs that aren't fit or healthy. They're just dogs with energy, which is different than creating fitness for dogs. Because then you might think, dogs that are out of shape or that are overweight or whatever it may be. But then you get this behavior element that's attached to the people looking for a fitness program for their dog. And so then you're like, oh, that wasn't my expectation really for this business. It becomes as much behavioral as it does fitness. But that worked for us. But it's being open to that discovery, because if you're like, I just want to do fitness programs for dogs and I'm getting all these dogs with crazy behavior, and you're like, no, 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 no. Aside from revenue streams, your ability to help people and just really being open to the discovery process of what this thing that you started is about. And so I went through that with the book, this process of what it really was about. And I'm like, okay. And again, it sounds weird, but I'm like, okay, that's what this book is about. So let me just kind of keep going down this path. And it was really, it's really, really exciting. And I think that whether it's the business aspect of it, and we were talking about why, your whys in our last podcast, but
Hmm.
discovery is a big reason as to why I like to do things. What can I discover about this thing that I'm doing that adds a layer of, just even if it's just enjoyment for me, that I didn't anticipate going in? And you just have to be open to it, and have that, like, no matter what is going to be at the end of this, I'm going to see this all the way through. And I can't underestimate the reality of finishing. And let's say if the book, it's their first draft, just finish it. Most people get stuck in this idea that, oh, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not going to be good enough.
Right.
You sit down and write this thing, that first draft, it's not going to be, it's going to be, you're going to read it and be like, what was I thinking? What was it? Like you look at the grammar and you look at the spelling, you're like, did I graduate like elementary school? Like, this is crazy. But you finished it. You got it done, and that's huge. And I've written some things before, and it's just like you finish it, you put it up, and you ignore it for a little bit of time. You just like you just take a break from it. Use the air conditioner.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you just take a break from it, and then you come back to it, and you kind of repeat that process until you put it in front of eyeballs, and you get some professional opinions, and you just kind of go this route until it's done enough, right? Is it ever done? Like I look at it now and I'm like, okay, I'd say this different. I'd do this different. It's never done. It's just released, right? That's what they say about movies. They're never done. They're just released. And that's, kind of is, with the book, it was just released. Um, and I'm proud of it. I think that, uh, it ended up being what I wanted it to be at the time where I wrote it for the audience that I was looking to write it for. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to check it out, it's Unleash Your Success: Proven Strategies to Achieve Financial Success as a Professional Dog Trainer, which is totally my jam because I think a lot of dog trainers are like, well, I got this. I'm an amazing trainer. I've got this. But there's this whole business side that needs to be considered, and going to things like Toastmasters, getting a mentor, getting business coach, reading these types of books is very important. You mentioned about being open, discovery, and finishing. Maybe you could speak a little on getting started, because sometimes, people just don't want to get started and they don't want to take the action because they want it to be perfect and have the perfect plan, and they're making the plan, but then they never execute.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Like you said, the perfect plan, and they never execute. The truth is, the biggest leap, it's not going from bad to good, good to better, better to great. The hardest leap is from nothing to something. Like that's the hardest thing to do. N- You know, it's funny because you say, well, how do you get started? And this is like, it seems like just cheesy, but you get started. Like you start where you're at. You just start. There are so many things that you can do to not start. And that's why I said I like visuals. Like I just start, mind mapping and all those different softwares that I use, and it's I have to catch myself sometimes because I make these diagrams and I start spending so much time making these diagrams because after they're done, to me they're like beautiful. I'm like, this is a perfect diagram. Look, it shows you exactly everywhere. I haven't done anything yet but make the diagram, you know what I mean? But it shows you exactly what to do. And so that's one of my hangups. And the other one is just the vulnerability. You got to know that it you're going to be judged. You got to know that it's not going to be perfect, but you just have to start where you're at. There's a if you feel vulnerable, then you start by just talking to people you trust, or talking to people who are gonna. And there's nothing wrong with this in the beginning. Talking to people who are gonna say, "Yeah, you're so smart. That's so great." Get that kind of motivation. Yeah, I always see you like talk to. It depends on your mom, but I'm like, you talk to your mom. Your mom thinks you can do anything, and so you just start that process. I mean, you don't, right? You don't talk to people who are going to be like, yeah, now's not the time. Like you wait for that, and to the point where you have something more solid, and then you start to challenge yourself. But in the beginning, you just have to start. You have just if it's writing, you just start jotting it down. I mean, everything. If it's a business, like you just got to just start. Like there's no wrong way to start. I think that's the biggest thing. Like people, they want to do it right from the beginning, and there's just no wrong way to start. You just
Love
you just
that.
start. You you
Yep.
just you just
There's no
I
wrong
hate
way to start.
that's it. You just got to do it,
Yeah.
and then it gets easier. The resistance gets less, and then you start to get momentum, and then everything from that point. But whether it's the gym, right, or a book or a business, whatever it is,
Yeah.
it's just starting, and I think like you were talking about, whether it's mentor, like just somebody who's going to just help you just you're ready, just do it, just write it, just start, just know it's not going to be what you want it to be that first time around. It's just not. And then you just kind of build from there, but you can't build from nothing. So you got to just start. And I wish I could say something magical, right, about starting, but is a great quote, a book I read. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he says it, you start where you stand. Like you start where I give you an example. We were talking in our meeting about your software, and we were going over my evaluation form. You said it was too long. And like I said, we were talking about it. I kind of knew. And so there were some things I wanted to do with it, quote unquote, before I changed it. Uh, and that process, let's say, it was about a week, and I'm like, forget it. And I just cut stuff out and I put it up. I will fix it if it needs to be fixed later. But right now, I have something that's easier for people to, send their information in. And that was the goal. And you can always make it better. But if I could have stayed with that other form for longer and be like, okay, how do I do this thing? How do I do that thing? And I want it to be like this and I want it to be like that. And essentially impeding my own process of starting to have an easier way for people to submit their information. So I was just like, nope, cut these things out. I could cut it shorter too. But that was my kind of thing of almost following my own advice. It's like, just, again, you get the Nike, just do it and all that kind of stuff. But it's really true. Like, you just have to just say, I'm doing this thing and figure it out sometimes as you go,
Yeah, I had
you know?
this exact experience the other night. We're rebranding, which is a huge job. I'm still in my Pet Biz Experts t-shirts, but it's just start. And it's been a gradual process. We got the new website up, but we still have the old website. And so I went on the old website and I added a banner that says, now you got to go over here. This is where we're at. And I was like, hey, I'll update all these buttons, book now buttons. So they now go to the Automation Dogs book now page. So now the two site, well, this site is speaking to the other one. And it just felt so freaking good. I was like, oh my gosh, we've been working on this. I could have done this like so easily. Like, that just took me I'm no WordPress wizard or anything, so it took me a lot longer than one that is, but I was just like, okay, that kind of just happened by accident, but we're moving forward. So yeah, it's a really good feeling, and I think you'll regret if you don't ever take action. Yeah, you're gonna have more regrets than not doing it.
And this might help people. One of the other things that I say to people in terms of what they see about people who are doing something and where they're at, I always say the difference between that person and you is they just started doing it. Like, that's the difference. They just started doing it. They're, even myself sitting here, I can tell you and my business is whatever, 12, 13 years in now, and we're kicking ass and all that stuff. But I just said, I'm doing this. I'm just doing it. I'm just doing it. And that's really the only difference is between that is the people who just, and I'm talking wherever you see them, whatever your goals are, the difference between them and you is they just started. You say, well, they had this and I don't have this, and there's somebody who doesn't have what you have and they've already started. So we can sit here all day long and talk about what somebody else has, what you don't have, and all this stuff. But the difference, I mean, they started with whatever they had and they're now doing whatever they're doing. And that's just it. That's the difference. And if you can keep that in your mind and you're looking at the person, you're like, wow, their business is thriving and they're doing, I'm like, but they started, they did it. They did it. That's the difference. So go, 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 go. You're like, okay, okay.
So tell us a lot about martial arts, because it is very unique. So maybe, like, why did you
So
create something? Obviously, you have a background, with martial
martial
arts.
arts.
Martial arts.
Yes.
That's me doing martial arts.
So, I mean, again, and we talked a little bit about this the last time, but um, it was really the real core of this. My ex-wife at the time, or my wife at the time, she was or is a veterinarian. She was doing a lot of work with older dogs, acupuncture and these modalities and things for dogs that have gotten arthritis and overweight and all this stuff. And it was tough because she's like, and she literally said, she said, I wish there was something for these dogs before they got like this. And the less they do is the thing about, well, all of us really an object at rest, right? But dogs don't know any better. So the less they do, the less they do. And you get the arthritis or you get whatever's going on, you get the weight and it hurts. And so they move less. They move less, they get weaker. They get weaker, they move less. And this is the cycle again with all of us, right? And so she literally said, she said, I wish there was something that there was something before this, before they got like this. And this was 2011, 2010, 2011. And she's like, no, it was before that. This was actually 2007 because she did the acupuncture course in 2005. So she's like, you should do something. And I was like, at the time, again, I had no experience with dogs training and or anything like that. And I was just, um, doing martial arts and all this kind of stuff actually. And so, I was like, well, okay. But that was the end of it because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was very insecure about it. And it's just one of those things like, I don't know what to do. So I just didn't start. And so it was about 4 years later where I was working on some projects and stuff, and they weren't going the way I wanted them to go. I was very upset about it, and kind of at a crossroad and something like that. And so, her and I had a talk, about finding my way or whatever it was. But I still hadn't come back to this concept yet. It was probably another couple of months before I was like, okay, so now this is 2011. So it's 4 years later, it's 2011. And I'm like, if I'm gonna do this, like, I don't know fitness and I know all these things. I don't know canine physiology. I had a dog at the time, and I trained him very well because I understood the concept from teaching martial arts, positive reinforcement, all these kind of things. And, that's where the concept comes from. And I did it, I'm like, okay, so I feel like I could train more dogs. The other aspects of the physiology, I'm like, you're gonna have to teach me. We're gonna have to figure this out. We're gonna have to go through stuff. And so, what, since she was doing the acupuncture and stuff, but one of the things she did was, then she took a veterinary rehabilitation course, and just different things so she could even learn more. And then through that, we kind of started working on this process of what we call now obedience and exercise. And it was very challenging in the beginning, but it was this process of just getting started. There was things like I used to call it my lab. I would go in my lab and I'd be like, okay, why don't we get dogs to do this? She said, you're not getting dogs to do that. I said, well, what do you mean? Why can't we just, she said, even if you get a dog to be able to do that, I'm not letting you do that. I'm like, okay, so it was because I didn't know, you know what I mean? So I'm looking
Yeah.
at exercises that people do, and I'm like, a week you have dogs do this. And so we went through this kind of process of translating human fitness to canine fitness, you know, not necessarily trial and error. I mean, there was some things that I tried with my dogs, but just, from an educational standpoint, trial and error. So I would come up with a concept and we would talk about this concept, how it would apply to dogs. Would it be something we should or shouldn't do? And she kind of steered me down this process. And once we had things that would work, then we would try them on our dogs, and she would work on different things with the clients that she was doing rehab or acupuncture or whatever it was. We would kind of go through this process. And that was the because the behavior aspect of it, the obedience, right, to sit down, stay, and come, and all that stuff, like, was the easier part. Like, that was just the process of training a dog. It was getting these exercises in, and of course, you start to understand that the exercises are just their behaviors anyway. So if I want a dog to do a particular exercise, I'm really just teaching them a behavior. I mean, that's what it is. So even if it's a person, like if you're doing an exercise, squats, curls, whatever it is, these are just movements. And for dogs, it's whether it's tricks, right, paw, right, we can turn paw into an exercise, down the stand to an exercise. It's just how we have the dog do it, the precision by which we have the movement, we want to place their feet, the equipment that we do it on, the repetitions that we do. These are all behaviors, but when you do them, you start changing how they do them, then it becomes an exercise. So that's kind of the process that we went through in order to kind of figure out what we should or should. And this was all before. I mean, canine fitness is a lot bigger now, but again, this is 2011. So this was before a lot of this fitness and things and that are out now, and certifications and all that kind of stuff that are out now that you can do. And so that was kind of this kind of discovery. And I always say, without her, I couldn't have done it, because I just didn't know what I needed to know as it relates to doing this, because it didn't exist. Now you can go see
Right.
Bobby Lyons and you can take a seminar or a course or get a certification and things through her, but you couldn't do that then. And so then it was like, okay, so there was things that I thought, I'm like, okay, we can have a dog do this. And she was literally like, you absolutely cannot have a dog do that. I'm like, okay. And there was some tension there sometimes, because I was like, and she's like, why am I here? Okay, you're right. You're the veterinarian. I apologize. So we kind of went through this process. And so, once we had these kind of basic exercises and things that we could say were safe, and, we worked through with our dogs and other people's dogs, and, or like you said, her clients' dogs. And then it was, how do we then incorporate this into, the obedience part that we're looking for, and how do we kind of build from there? We have this concept, right? As we're talking about right before we started, it was like, how do I turn this into a business now? Like, this is a business that I'm trying to develop. This is not a program. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We could develop an obedience and exercise program. that then whether we teach it to other trainers or whatever it is, but this is a business. Like we're not just creating this program, we're creating this business, and this program needs to work within this business. And I think that's also important when you're developing your programs for what you're doing for your business. They have to work into a business. And we were talking about this a bit in the last one. They have to be something in which you can package, if you will, profitably, whether it be through add-ons, whether it be that's your core business, whatever it might be. We're doing this for a living. And so we have to be able to kind of create this business model with it. And so that was the kind of next step. And once I got the okay for the exercises and the things that we were doing, and of course, like I said, the obedience, I learned the process. And that was the one thing I have to say. This is why I always say I couldn't have done it without her. One of the things was because she was a veterinarian, we would go to veterinarian, she would have to do veterinary conferences and all this stuff is for her continuing ed. But as the spouse, I was allowed to go. So while I'm there, I'm going to, veterinary behavior conferences, or lectures and all this kind of stuff. So that was a unique experience also, because people always ask me, how did you learn? Did you, because of, did you do this certification, that certification? It was more like I got lucky being her tag along to these veterinary conferences to really get in the room with people that I wouldn't have been able to get in a room with otherwise. And so that was a really unique and cool experience that I was able to have. And then again, blending all that into this kind of core program that we could then package and essentially sell. But I knew I didn't want to go door to door. I knew I didn't want to kind of work at another person's facility or whatever. Like I knew those things I didn't want to do. I wanted to have my own facility. And that was why I was really adamant about this has got to be able to generate revenue, because I didn't have a client base. I wasn't already going door to door. And it was kind of if you build it, they will come, right? But it was more like, if you build it, will they come? Because, who knows? Like I said, it's fitness and, the understanding, even the dog, the dog owner or any pet owner, the savviness of the dog owner now isn't what it was 13, 14 years ago. Like there's been this progression of what people want. There's been this explosion of the number of dogs. I always say now the dog is the new cat. Like we have so many people who have multiple dogs. Like before you had one dog. Now having one dog is almost, everybody's got one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's different now. And so that was, that was the thing. And so there's always these kind of things that kind of happen. And fortunately for us, this was one of them, because I was very adamant about how I wanted to do it. And so once we got to a certain point where it was something that we could package, we packaged it, and then we opened, and it was just like, again, go, 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 go. Like, just do it, just do it, just do it kind of
And
thing.
the clients, they stay with their dog. It's not like a day train or board and train where
Yes.
they drop them off and you work the dog out and teach it all the
Yes.
things. The owner comes in. I think your lessons with the owners are a little shorter than, maybe an hour, right?
Or 30 minutes.
That's cool.
So that was also part of, right? So we create this business model. So that was part of it. Okay, so here we have this thing, like we're going to do this. I'll keep saying obedience and exercise. And so we really start off with just doing like primarily just group classes and stuff. Obedience and exercise classes. That was like the core of it. And then as time went on, we started doing more and more private sessions. But the owner is always there. That was the other thing about it. Like we don't do drop off. We don't do drop off. We don't do drop off. Like the only time we did it was during COVID because we couldn't let people in. We did drop off, and it's just for us. Like this is for us. So our whole thing was about developing and or creating experience for dog and owner. Like that was our thing. So there are times, I might have said this before, but there were times where if a dog has a particular, we're doing just straight up exercise, and say it's arthritic, and so we're doing particular exercises that the owner, it's going to be a lot longer before they can do, just like any sort of obedience, right? If we're teaching the dog to sit or whatever, like we can do it faster than we can get to teach the owner to do it. So there's times where we're just the goal, if you will, is not as much the owner being able to have the dog listen or whatever it is. It's just the dog needs the strengthening of its hind limbs or whatever. So we'll do more of that, but they're still there. Like we still have, even if they're just literally sitting in the chair, watching us, they're still there. So we, even in that scenario, we don't do drop off. Even if we work on separation anxiety, where we need the owner separate, they're still there. Whether we have them in the front or we have them step out, like we've just drop off is just, it's just like I said, we're a facility that's all about the dog and the owner. And there's a lot of ways to do this, but that was the choice that we made from the jump. And again, we have our clientele, we have the business that model that people, that they want, as opposed to, there are some people who want drop off, there are some people who want board and train, and that's fine. You don't have to do everything. You don't even have to be capable of doing everything. You just have to know what your business model, who suits your business model, and that's what you go after. Don't try to force people to do something that they don't want to do. Like, we'll have people call us, you do board and train. No, this is what we do, and this is why we do what we do, but we don't do board and train. So with that in mind, we'll have a lot of people who will do the board and train, and then they'll come to us afterwards because now they want to do things, or they feel like they have a better handle of the dog now that they did the board and train. So a lot of these things can work in conjunction. And I think sometimes dog trainers, you know, forget that. Like, it doesn't, you don't have to be able to do them all. You just have to be able to do what you do well, and then go from that standpoint. There's nothing wrong, like I said, with like, we work with a lot of in-home trainers. Actually, I shouldn't say it like that. We have a lot of in-home trainers who recommend their clients and come to us because they don't have, it's not even like they can't, let's say, do the whatever obedience, agility, whatever. They don't have the environment where a lot of dogs then have trouble, which is around distractions and all these kind of things. They don't, like, you can go to, let's say, a dog park, and we'll even do lessons in dog parks, but you don't have control over all those other people dogs. Right. So a lot of people will then come to us because we have control of their environment, and we can work these lessons so these dogs now can get better in an area in which their in-home trainer couldn't provide them.
Right.
You know?
So,
So yeah, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, it's all good. I was just going to ask about like the folks that really need the fitness for their dog. And
Hmm.
we see it. Like, I've been sitting in the vet hospital with my dog and just getting him checked over before we're on our way to the world championship. He's at competition weight. He looks amazing. And, the lady next to me is like, he's so skinny. Is he okay? And I'm like, oh my goodness. But then her dog comes out and it's like morbidly obese. And I'm like, I totally see what's her perspective. So maybe could you share a little bit about that? Like, I assume folks that come to you want their dog to like be fit and trim and all that, but like, do that some of them like, no, he's good, I'm just gonna keep feeding him?
Yeah. So it's one of the hardest aspects of it, honestly, convincing clients. And we have charts, and we have a scale. It's what we have, our
A weigh
scale is
in.
actually, yeah, our scale is right in front of the mirror. So I say we do that on purpose. Look at yourself. No, um, but yeah, and so it's hard. And the one thing I tell, like, everybody, whether it's clients or just people who are, you have the conversation. I say, if you see a normal weight, what a dog should be at its normal weight, you will say it's too skinny. Like, that is just, and that's not like, an athletic, trim, shredded dog. That's just a normal weight dog. And so you'll say it's too skinny. And that's a fight. And there's a number of reasons for that. There's a number of reasons, right? Because a lot of it comes from people rescue dogs. Before they rescue them, the thing, it looks like it could escape from jail because it's so emaciated. And so they swing the pendulum. Like, the health, the nurturing, the, you know, gratification of saving the dog comes in putting weight on it. And so it's easy to just be like, my dog is fine now because when I got it, it was emaciated. And now look at it. Like, wow, yes, I can only imagine what it looked like before, but now, it's now we got to start working on some other things. And that's when we start talking
Yeah.
about, the injuries, IBDD, and all these things that can happen as it relates to, CCL television, all this. I always say, it's not like you or I, like, there's a lot of ways we can move around and avoid walking. Let's say some dogs you can put in a bag and all that, but, your average dog, 30, 40 pounds, it's walking everywhere, and God forbid it's bigger than that. You're not, no one's putting it in a stroller when it's 80 pounds. It's a lot of weight on the joints, and it leads to all these other issues that I always say the dog doesn't know, right? It doesn't know that extra, whatever it is is going to have these detrimental effects. You do. Owner does. You do. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind. Sure, the dog is going to eat it. Like, sure, you might have that cookie because it's yummy, but you know what you're doing. They don't. And so
Right.
we always have to kind of take care when we kind of have these conversations. And sometimes they'll be like, well, the vet didn't say that. Why didn't my vet say it? Or the vet said it's good. And then we have again, like I said, my ex, you know, I'll be like, I can put you on the phone with our veterinary advisor. She'll tell you the 15 reasons why your vet just stopped because they said it over and over and they just stopped fighting you on it because you didn't make the change. And that's not, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Again, this is just what happens a lot of times. And, we have we used to write a lot of, blog posts and stuff, and that was one of them. 10 reasons why your vet didn't tell you your dog was fat. And the first one was like, they already did.
Yep.
you know
Yeah.
so, and then there's such an emotional element to it. So we had this is crazy one. We had a actually it's not that bad, but we had we did evaluation. One of the trainers was like, the dog is overweight and all these kind of things. And so the lady didn't enroll and she wrote an email complaining about how the trainer fat shamed the dog. And so, in my head, I'm like, she didn't because she can't, because the dog can't feel fat shamed. Like, it's not possible. So now we're talking about how the owner felt about it. And so that's a big part of this conversation. But the other part of it was she's like, and this is like the really bad part. She's like, I only feed the dog chicken, like boiled chicken. Like, that's all I feed the dog, which is, red flag number one. But she's like, have you ever heard of anything essentially becoming overweight from just eating protein? How ridiculous. And so you're like, okay, aside from the fact this person doesn't understand why they shouldn't just feed their dog only
Yeah.
boiled chicken, they don't understand caloric intake, obviously, either. Because it doesn't matter what it is if the calories are exceeding, the calories in are exceeding calories out. I mean, it's gonna it's gonna it's gonna gain weight. Like, it doesn't matter if it's protein. It's gonna gain weight because protein has calories, and you're feeding your dog calories that it's not expending. Uh, and so I responded, and I tried to be as nice and professional, and apologize and all this stuff. But here we talk about the health of the dog, and clearly a client that doesn't understand the damage that they're doing to their dog from the start. That the fact that it was overweight, but clearly they're not feeding it balanced nutrition, and then it doesn't understand what's actually making the dog overweight. They don't understand. But they never came back, unfortunately, and that happens because she felt shame, and that's really what it comes down to. The owner is now feeling the shame. So we get a number of people, and God bless them. They come in, they're like, my dog's overweight, and I need to get this weight off, and they say, this is what happened. And I'm always like, we're not judging you. I'm just glad you're here. Like, you don't like, I get it. Like, we gain, like, I get it, but I'm glad that you're here. And you see some of them, and they're bad. And I always say these are the ones that just show up, and veterinarians see a lot worse because they have to go to the vet. They don't have to come to us.
True.
And so, I mean, that's the biggest thing. Like, it is, it's a delicate conversation. Most people come to us as it relates to the fitness aspect, not for the dog to lose weight, but for the dog to expend energy, um, because it's a high energy dog, and or because it's behavior, because it's a high energy dog. I would say maybe 5% of the people who come to us are specifically looking for their dog to lose weight, 5 or 6%,
Gotcha.
depending.
Okay.
I wish it was higher because then we have to tell them. And there's times I'm in evaluation, I'm looking at this dog, I'm like, I got to tell this lady this dog is overweight. And I don't know how they're going to take it, but I have to say it. Like, this is, and then most people, understand. And they're like, okay, some don't. And you don't, it's one of those things that it gets hard because the more you fight them on it, the worse they feel about it. So the more resistant they come.
Yeah.
It's one of those conversations where you can't push somebody into it. Like, you gotta just, and so we explain it, we ease it. And then there's the other aspect of it in terms of just knowing that over time, what we're doing is going to affect the weight of this dog. And so we don't have to beat them up, especially on day one. Like, we just got to get them in
Right.
here and get them, and then they start realizing, what we're doing and how it's helping. And they're like, I just didn't know. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, you came in, and that's all we can ask is that you're here. So I wish more people came for their dog's weight, but at least the majority of the ones that don't come for the weight start to make positive changes as it relates to what's going on with the dog's weight, and they understand it better over time. So there's
Yeah.
always that kind of slow burn.
Gently leading
Yeah.
them to
Yeah.
seeing, the reality, versus sometimes, like, you're the expert and you just saying, hey, your time is valuable, my time is valuable, I'm just going to say it like it is.
Right.
But
Right.
some people can't handle that, and gently leading them and just figuring out which. How about, so it's kind of cool when you said, like, you have the weigh in, which is kind of neat. Do you do any competitions like agility, swimming, dock diving stuff?
Competitions as it relates to weight, or just competitions in general?
Well, it sounds like a lot of folks come to you because they want their dog and them to participate in fun
Yeah.
things and get the energy out. So, like, competitions for like fun and
So
energy.
yes, so we do, and I'm not gonna lie. The truth be told, we should be more um uh facility wide about it. Like, there's a lot of ways that we can capitalize on that as it relates to momentum. And so we've talked about these things and looking at different ways to implement them. But we do, like, we have our own little agility league, which we do. We try to do it quarterly, which is fun for some people. Some people stress out, of course, anytime they see a timer. They're like,
Yeah.
they start like, we have on our pool, we have the numbers in terms of when dogs are jumping in. And again, we don't have a running deck. And so we'll tell people, because we get, and this is the other thing about the fitness aspect of it. And in terms of what I was saying about some people with the behavior go to a board and train first, or they have an in-home trainer and then they come to us. So we'll get people who do other sports, like they'll do a higher level of competitive agility than our agility league, but they'll come for us for things like conditioning or cross training, swimming and stuff like that. So again, keeping in mind, you do what you do well and you'll be fine. You don't have to do what everyone else does. So I don't, if I felt the need, especially where we're located, again, this is Long Island, this is just outside of New York City. And so, rent, right, is astronomical. And so if I, so one of the big agility facilities is maybe 10, 15 miles from us, further, what we would say out east on Long Island. So the further you go out east, like anywhere, it's further from the main metropolis. So it's further from New York City, it's further from Manhattan. Um, so where our rent is cheaper than in the city, their rent is cheaper than ours. And so if I felt the need, I'm like, oh, there's this big agility facility out there. I need to quote unquote compete. I need to offer what they offer to feel like I'm going to succeed. I couldn't do it where I am, because it just would be, there's a reason why they're further out. And then, there is that, what is my target audience? And so we get a lot of more pet, and they do a lot of, competitive obedience and all that kind of stuff. So it's not necessarily, it would be a bad business model for us, right?
Yeah.
So
I could see
with
that.
that in mind, doing what we do well, we get people who go to them and us.
Hmm.
And the truth is, the owner of that facility comes to us for what we do. And so we will recommend. She'd be like, listen, you're trying to get better. You need to go to martial arts. And we'll tell people, now that your dog is doing this much better in agility, you may want to look at competitions. And, that's where you're going to go if you're going to do those things. It's just the nature of it. And so we do have some in facility kind of competitions and fun stuff, and so we'll get people, let's say if they do dock diving, and we don't have the run up and dock dive, but we can do conditioning to get your dog stronger, work on jump. And then we have a deck, so we'll do, let's say, explosive jumping from a sit or a standstill. And so if your dog can jump this far without running, when you now give it the run up, it's going to be able to jump even further. And so there's a lot of ways that um again, can not have what someone else has and still provide services even to the same person who goes somewhere else. But also within that realm of what you were saying in terms of competition and fun stuff, we do provide that. And like I said, there's it's always one of those things, there's deeper we can go, and especially if facility wide. And, we have our kind of records, and we'll always talk about it with people within the activity that they're doing. But I definitely think, and we've talked about, having like a leaderboard, if you will. So when people walk in, they can kind of, you know what I mean? They can kind of
Yeah.
see what people are doing, how much weight this dog might have lost, how far this
Yeah.
dog is jumping, and whether, even if it's tricks, how many tricks this dog has done, and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of ways to kind of go with that. And that is the thing, especially when you have the owner involved. When you have the owner involved, then there, you get some that the enjoyment of it is what you're really looking. How do I build enjoyment? Because now I have an owner here who isn't coming if it's not fun.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part about the dog overweight. The minute you start talking about how quote unquote fat that dog is, they're not having fun anymore. You know what I mean? They don't want to come back.
Yeah, I had a dock diving facility in Las Vegas, and people come out and practice like crazy. We would have fun jumps and getting people to volunteer to kind of make sure we had wranglers and things like that. Easy breezy. The It would pack. Like people just went crazy for it. But then we would host an actual like dock dogs competition, which is a much bigger deal. And getting the volunteers and the attendees, it really was thin, and it was select few that really wanted to go to that level. Many people are very happy to just go where they're happy and their dog is happy and everybody's acclimated and comfortable, and to jump off a different dock diving dock into a different pool. I don't know what the hang up is, because I don't have that
Right.
mindset, but I definitely have seen it firsthand where it's like, if it's just, they're comfortable, I guess, and it's packed. It could be highly successful, but once you add competition, something stresses them, or the money, maybe it's more expensive, or I don't get it myself because I'm a competitive person. But
Yeah.
yeah, I could see this being like highly popular.
Yeah. And you're right about that in terms of just some people, whether it's this level of stress or whatever it is, they just I think a lot of people are just, I think they're just hiding, you know what I mean? Like they want to win and they don't want to be that person who's like, because you're comfortable. And especially when you know everybody, and we'll poke fun. And so we'll do, like in class, we'll do like silly competitions in terms of like sit to stand, which dog, and we'll time it for a minute. We'll do like 30 seconds practice and say, now we're doing 1 minute sit to stand. And I'm a competitive person too. So I'll call people out. I'm like, listen, guys, this is a competition. We're going to now decide who is good and who is terrible. So sometimes it's, once you put people on the spot and they can't hide, no one wants to be terrible. But if I don't compete, then I don't put myself out there to have to either acknowledge that I'm ready to step on everyone's throat, or I don't have to, that when they talk about, sometimes, competition brings out the best. I mean, it can bring out some other things, but nobody wants to be terrible. And so I say it in a joking manner, but as soon as I
Yeah.
say so who's good and who stinks, and the people are like, oh my God, I don't want to stink. We're having this competition. It's start, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
they end up doing it, and then they end up having fun. And so sometimes it's just how you present it. You let people hide, they hide. I mean, that's just what it is. And so I'll tell my trainers that. I'm like, guys, like you gotta push people. You gotta sometimes make them uncomfortable. And we're not doing this just to torture people. We're doing this because now when this person says, oh, I don't want to stink, they're going to work that much harder with their dog. Like that's just what they're going to do. And that would be the goal, right, of all competitions. But we know, like you just said, that high level competition then gets people who are high level competitive. And, you get so many other people who are insecure and fearful and all that kind of stuff. So they're not going to want to be there. So within the facility, these less intense competitions, but yet still calling people out, I think is where there's value. And as a trainer, as a business owner, that's another thing that you have to also look at. And that's why I said there's a high level agility facility not that far from us, but that's not us.
Right.
And I let's just say I could do that. Would completely change my business model and where we would be located and all these things. I said, I'm not doing that. I'll just train these people who, just want to do what we call fun agility. They don't care. And so and so that's my business. And so there's part of that accepting, what you want to do. And this is where we start talking about as a professional dog trainer. So you might want to then train people who are just having fun at agility, but then compete in a higher level agility yourself. Or you might be like, this is what I want to do for myself. So these are the people I want to train. Like there's so many different options. And it just comes down to making that decision and accepting it. I'm like, I'll train. There's, like you said, again, repeat the number of people who were doing the dock diving versus the number of people who wanted to do it for fun. Generally speaking, you have a larger clientele base
Yeah,
when you're doing it more on a lower level. And
absolutely.
that's just something to decide. I can't tell you what's right or wrong for you, but I can say for me, from day one, I'm like, I'll take the little guy. They're paying me,
Yep.
and then from within that, you find your price point for what someone who's just looking to have some fun is willing to pay for that fun.
Yeah, I can't even think of how many times someone's called and said, I want to do agility with my dog. Or I've said, is there anything special you want to do with your dog? I want to do agility with my dog. I'm in my head, I'm like, there's no way. Like, you're crazy. But they don't know. They just see these dogs, Westminster running and jumping and go through the tunnel. Like, it looks really simple, but it's like, it's really
Yeah.
hard.
It's and again, we don't do it, at a high level, and it's still hard. And like you said, most people just see it and they're like, "Oh, my dog runs across the back of my couch." And that's always one it gets to zoomies. It's so agile, and you know what I mean? And so one of the biggest things, and this is where the obedience and exercise comes in for us when we explain it. We call agility obedience on the move. And so your dog might be agile, but it don't listen to you. So you can't do agility with that dog because I always say we're not just unclipping the leash and letting it run around how it wants. And so now we start directing, we find out the dog doesn't listen. And then we start seeing some anxieties sometimes because the dog is being restricted from what it wants to do. And now there's pressure on the dog. And I'm telling you, sometimes in evaluation, like I've never seen my dog like this. Like they usually I'm like, they do that because they're just running around doing whatever you want. So you take a child who's running around the house like a maniac, and then you put it in the middle of any competition. You know what I mean? You put it in a class full of now sprinters, and that kid's not going to be, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it changes how things are, how they experience. And the more the dog is habitually running around free, the less it's now wanting to listen and quote unquote be forced. We're not forcing the dog, but the dog feels restricted because if you unclip the leash, it's going the other direction just for fun. So, that's why, like I said, that's why I don't mind, what we do in that regard, because I can take that person who says, I just watched Westminster and now they bring their dog in. And there's a level of disappointment, but there's also a level of understanding that there's so much more we can work on. There's so much more we can get out of this than you realize. That, and we can still make it fun. We can still do that agility jump, but we're not just doing it in the sense of what you saw on Westminster, at least not today. Let's just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same. I went out, took a golf lesson. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible, but like, it looks so easy.
That's so easy.
Dance lessons, I've taken those, and I'm like, why am I sweating so
Right.
much? This is
Right.
really not fun for me at all. Like, but the professionals make it look so easy. But yeah, you got to set them up for
It's really hard.
success. You got to set them up for success. So I wanted to ask
Can we
some
can we
other.
pause 1 minute? Can we
Yep,
pause? I'm getting a phone call
yep,
here.
yep. All right. So we talked a lot in the two podcasts about business, about dog training, and all that good stuff. But lightning round, I wanted to just throw some different questions at you if you're okay with that. All right. Favorite type of music?
Okay, so now I understand the nature of these lightning round questions. I'm a fan of like some electronic house, stuff, EDM. Like I like my beats fast and furious, So that I don't like to slow it down, but if it's gonna get my blood flowing, then I usually dig it.
And if you were a breed of dog, what breed of dog do you think, like, what best suits you and your personality?
I'd want to say this might send the wrong idea, but I want to say I'm probably
Malinois?
Malinois.
I would
Yeah,
say, I was guessing like Malinois or Dutch Shepherd. I
yeah,
think that suits you.
yeah.
And then
I'm
what's
a,
your
I'm a, I was gonna say I'm an older one. I'm not as aggressive as I used. I'm a little older one, but
And what's your like go-to breed of dog? Like, no offense to all the different breeds, but we all kind of have our favorites. What's your favorite right now? Because I'm sure it
um,
changes.
I like a mal. Like I'm honestly, I'm anything high energy. It doesn't matter. Like the crazier, the better. Like I always tell. It's funny because it's the whole process of this martial arts and what we do. It just ended up suiting me so well. And I tell people I prefer a high energy dog because when you train, you train a high energy dog, it'll sit, it'll down, But when you say go, it's going. And so it's all about channeling and training the dog. And I'd rather that than something I gotta like roll around to get it. Like I gotta get it started. I'd rather have to turn it off than turn it on. Like
Yeah.
that's just me. Like
Yeah, I like that too. And any podcasts that you listen to regularly?
podcasts, no, but I've recently been listening to a number of audiobooks. One I would highly recommend. It's You're a Badass. And the title of it makes it sound a little more intense than it is. But her name, I think, is Jen Sincero or something like that. You're a Badass. And she's got a couple of books, but they're really good. So, and by that I mean like she's really good at it. The book, the nature of the book is about achieving your goals, and she's really good at the conflict that we have that gets in the way of the things that we try to accomplish that we don't know, whether it's giving yourself permission. And we talked about that before, like, who am I to say, pay me $500 for this, lesson, or who am I to just open a dog training business or any kind of business? Here's a big one. Everybody has told me or always tells me that you'll never make money as a dog trainer, or you're greedy because you want to make money as a dog trainer. Like she goes through the processes of all of these and why they're there and how to overcome them. And it's really good because it's you don't realize how much that stuff gets in the way. This kind of internal dialogue that we have, or these subconscious beliefs that we might have learned as kids that are now creeping in ways in which we didn't see or didn't realize. So yeah, that was one of the most recent audiobooks I listened to, and it was really good. Funny thing about that, sorry to keep going, but
No, keep
I
going.
actually bought it not long after I opened. I remember I was in Target, and this was the book. It wasn't that they didn't have it. So I was in Target, and I saw this. And again, it's catchy. It's not what I thought it was about when I bought it. It was called "You're a Badass," and there's got some other things I can't remember what it says. And I was like, all right, well, I'm taking this. And I didn't listen to it until this year. This was like 2014. I grabbed it and then I listened to it finally this year. And so there's a lot of things about that in terms of whether it's advice or just things that you may not be ready for. And when you are ready for it, then it kind of comes to you. And I had this book and clearly I wasn't ready for it. And I know I wasn't ready for it once I listened to it. But yeah, that was definitely one. And goes back to just being open to things. You just have to be open, and I'm much more open than I was then. And this book definitely struck a nerve.
Cool. I'm going to look that one up. I haven't heard of it, but I like the name of it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really good.
And one last question. Is there anybody that you'd like to see on my podcast? Maybe I can reach out to them.
Anybody
That might be a good fit. I try to talk about dog training business stuff, but sometimes, the life story of somebody or someone that wrote a book, an Olympic
I mean,
athlete.
yeah, I want to say yeah. I think what might be interesting, let's say just from a dog training realm, is someone who's not, let's say, where we are. And so we kind of like we get to a position and we offer this insight and value to new dog trainers. But there is a difference between now what we have to offer versus if you would have asked me 13, 12, 13 years ago what I was going through or what my ideas and philosophy was. And there's a lot of it where you think, and I can say, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. The key word being did, right? I'm not where this person is. And when you're there, there is value in the people who've been there before you, but there's also value in the people who are there with you or doing it while you're doing it. And I think that would be an interesting kind of idea, especially because, again, it's powerful. So whatever let's say I'm struggling to lose weight. I'm not, but I'm just I was struggling to lose weight. And so I go to a class and I go to a fitness class and I have, this instructor who's great and is a motivating class. But who do I identify with? Do I identify with the instructor or identify with the people in the class with me who are also losing weight? You know, what are they, what got them here or what kind of bond do we create because we're both going through this process at the same time? And there's so much of it on any level, whether you're have success or don't, where you do kind of feel alone. You do feel like, your experience is so singular, whether it's is or not, that it's nice to connect to people or to hear from people, be like, you know, I don't feel like doing this. It's easy for us to say now because we are where we are now. And I can say there was a time I didn't feel like doing it, but that's not where I'm at now. I'm not that I don't sometimes not feel like doing stuff, but it's a lot easier to not feel like doing it now because I'm not now, you go back and forth and you're like, now I'm just being late, whatever. I already, the belly's full, so I don't feel like doing this because my belly's full. When your
Right.
belly's not full and you don't feel like doing it, that's a whole different thing. And so that would be something, again, along the lines of dog trainers, that I think would be something of value to visit, here and there. It's just someone who's just like they're just starting out and they're just talking about their experience of what they're going through now, just for someone else to be like, yeah, that's literally what we've had that conversation, right? As we've been talking, you're like, yeah, no, been there, done, like, so we're able to relate on a certain level because we went through it, or we're going through the thing where we're at now, having had some success and reaching back to help others. And
Yeah.
so just that alone, we've connected on a certain level. And so there would definitely be value in someone who hasn't gotten there yet talking to that would connect on that level, or people, again, I have trainers where I know, they want their lives to be different still, and what they're going through versus even having that path, it's still not always easy. And it's still to hear like those where I'm like, you shouldn't be uncomfortable about asking for money, but they are, and I'm not. And so somebody else saying, listen, I know, but it's so uncomfortable because this, that, and the third, and the sweat starts pouring, and someone else is like, that's literally my daily life. We can't provide that. And people who have achieved a certain level can't provide that. So I think that would be, I think, a good way to kind of go in
Yeah,
a
I'm thinking too, like somebody like you seem very transparent. You spoke in our last podcast about, some times that were rougher and things like that. And some people are maybe more private. So maybe like a person, because sometimes we come out of like our first dog training school and we're cocky and, so maybe somebody that's a little transparent. I'm gonna have to think that one through.
vulnerable,
Yeah,
I think is the word there.
honest
and
and
and um and it I'll see, I'll reach out. I don't want to throw anybody out there who isn't necessarily ready for it, but I might have a person or two to kind of that might be willing to do it, because it does take that. It does take, putting yourself out there, and that's the hardest thing, that vulnerability. And just, again, like you said, sometimes you just want to be cocky, like, I can do, you only think that because you haven't done it. But then there's that, you know situation where someone is going through it and they are able to really relate what they're going through from a personal level to add value for other trainers out
yeah.
there, or like you said, anyone doing anything, uh, because there is that kind of human experience, whether it's dog training or whether it's a sport or whether it's a business or whether it's being a parent, you know and I would say that's the one thing that's changed about me. When I was talking before about the martial arts can fail, so now I'm a single dad with, my kids live with me, and I can't run my business how I used to. You know what I mean? Not that it can fail, but I can't be there all the time like I used to. And that's been a big change. And there's, whether anyone out there who wants to be a dog trainer has kids, or whatever it is, like, these are the kind of things, especially when we talk about being professionals. Like, there's times where you have to make those sacrifices. I mean, my kids come to work with me all the time. Like, they're always there. And I said before, my oldest daughter we signed a lease and then had the baby, and at six weeks old, I was bringing her to the facility because my ex-wife, she was a vet and all this stuff. And we had put so much money into business and all that stuff. She only took the 3 weeks off maternity, and she had to go to work. So she couldn't bring the baby with her. And, my family doesn't live around us, and her parents weren't necessarily equipped to do what we needed them to do. So I'm like, I'll just have to bring her with me. But, then they grow up a little and you can't just attach them to you, and, schooling and all this kind of stuff. So that's been quite a ride. But it's the vulnerability. It's just being able to talk about those experiences, I think. And they're hard. They're hard to kind of just be like, I'm just going to say this and hope people take it the right way, because
Yeah.
that's not always what happens. So, to answer your question, I say, if you can find the right dog trainer, even someone who might have started doing it and stopped, and all the reasons as to why they stopped. These are valuable conversations to have. It, and I don't know in terms of if you thought about any veterinarians or anything like that, because my ex, sh her and her friends in vet school, they always talk about this. In vet school, they, at some point in vet school, they were like, "Ooh, this is not what I thought it was going to be." But they're so far down the line and all that kind of stuff. So those are always to me interesting experiences, and how that kind of ties into, because that's a business in and of itself. It's definitely, as we've gone through this experience, this was one of the things, you know, my ex and I talked about, before we opened, um, just in terms of the value of having something like this for dog owners, as opposed to, within being in still in the field. And so I always tell people have to go to the vet. They don't necessarily have to come to us, but they choose to, and that's a different experience. And in the medical field, like, there's so many vet techs and things out there. I'm like, why are you doing that? You should be over here doing what we do. Because it's I find it just more rewarding, and it's less like we're alleviating dog stress. We have this anxious dog here, and our goal is to make this dog's life feel better. And your goal is to give it a shot it don't want. You know what I mean? And that's a different experience. But yeah, so I'll think about some more I might shoot out in terms of just different things that I think that might relate to, just valuable stories and stuff, because I feel sometimes that, when you can translate an experience that may not have anything to do with dogs, but there's still value in it, that's helping in ways that people didn't necessarily think they needed help, or it could help, and it does.
Excellent. Excellent. That really helps. Some great ideas. Well, Jeris, could you just tell us a little bit about where folks can find you?
Yes. The martial arts are, I think if I lean forward, this camera's going to tilt up a little bit. There it
Yep,
is.
the martial arts stock.
Yeah, martialarts.com is where you can find more about the facility and things that we kind of do, and just how we kind of put together these activities and stuff, with just giving people, either giving them an outlet or just improving. I shouldn't say or, but and always improving. And so the one thing I always compare it to is like going to the dog park, take your dog to the dog park, and it gives your dog an outlet, but it doesn't improve its behavior. And so that was really, as we started to say, well, what's this place and who's this really catering to? And it's just like, can we recreate that dog park experience in more structured, activities that are going to improve behavior and relationships, as opposed to unleashing a dog and then just sitting on your phone and stuff. And so that's the basis of the facility. And for the business aspect is financialfido. And that's just, everything that I have started to kind of put together in terms of helping people make this step to professional. And that's, as we spoke before, about making money and just being able to do what you love and make a living doing that, instead of feeling that you're trapped somewhere between there, or you have to give it up, because you don't.
Excellent. Well, themartialarts.com. Thank you so much, Jeris,
Yes,
for joining us again. And
you
again,
are welcome.
I'm Lianne Shinton, automationdogs.com. And thanks everybody for listening.